Welcome to the Thought Balloons podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Folsham. With me today are two good friends of mine, colleagues, co-Twitch streamers on the Twitch platform, and creators and owners of Oneshi Press Comics. Welcome to the show, Jayel and Lynsey.
Hello.
Hey, we're glad to be here. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, we're doing okay.
Yeah.
It's been a long week already.
We're fulfilling one Kickstarter and getting ready to launch another. So we're just, nose to the grindstone.
Nice. That, is a perfect segue into our subject of talking today is Kickstarter. So far I have recorded a solo podcast on the second day of my Kickstarter. I talked about all of my thoughts leading up to the launch day and the day after. And then last week we talked to Mr. Abstracto, who's coloring the comic that I'm doing, and I kind of got his ideas about like what he thought about doing, like being a part of a Kickstarter, because it's also his first like involvement in a project like this. It was kind of interesting getting like the kind of outsider's perspective on my own project. And I thought it'd be fun to have on you all today so that we can talk about like not only what your first Kickstarter campaign was like, how it went and all that, but you guys have done what, this is 7 leading into 8 now.
So this will be our 8th successful Kickstarter, but truth be told, we've run 9 campaigns. This will be the 9th campaign we're running.
We've worked one.
Yeah, we had a hard bork, as they say. Do they say that? If not, they should.
The Swedish chef does.
Oh. Yeah. No. Yeah. So, we did have one that didn't pan out. We got, I think, a little ahead of ourselves in planning, and
too big for our britches, maybe the correct term.
It was a hard time also, the pandemic really unsettled a lot of things. Right. And I think we pushed a little hard and tried a little hard at a really unstable time, and we had a lot of great traction and a lot of people came out to support us. We did really well, but we didn't make our goal. So what we immediately did upon not making our goal was to refocus, redouble our efforts, streamline our campaign. We brought our goal down to less than what we raised on our failed campaign, and just told all of our backers, hey, we didn't make our goal, but we're going to relaunch right now. And if you repledge for the same amount on the first day, we'll be funded in the first day. And sure enough, we were funded in the first day. Nice. So we used that month of hustle and that month of energy of all of our wonderful supporters. We just used that to immediately nail our goal on the relaunch. And then we had an entire month to get extra, Cool. So that was really cool. Lesson learned, now we're going to stay humble, stay hungry, but stay humble, right. Stay within what we can definitely, drum up in terms of goals, and then always try to get extra, but yeah, so this will be our 9th campaign and our 8th successful one starting in October. mid-October. What is it? The 18th we're launching?
Yeah, the 18th of October is our launch date for our next Kickstarter.
Awesome.
Fingers crossed, knock on wood, do all of your superstitious things in the hopes that nothing goes haywire and that date stays locked in place. Because if there is anything that 2020 and 2021 have taught most of us, it's that things aren't super certain all the
You
time.
gotta stay flexible.
You gotta stay a little light on your feet.
Yeah. Process on the fly.
Yeah.
Stay in this
Float like a
pilot
butterfly.
seat, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So that's actually interesting to me to know that it was not your first campaign that was unsuccessful. I feel like, and this is, I'm super new to the whole, Kickstarter community. I backed a couple Kickstarters before, like I was thinking like that would be, an avenue that I would take for my own stuff. Because honestly, like, I mean, if I've learned anything so far, it's that I actually have a lot bigger reach than what I thought I did. But still, like, I don't have a huge audience. So, I was kind of in and around Kickstarter and things like that a little bit before like I decided to dip my toe in the water. But for someone who's pretty, ignorant to how things work from an outsider's perspective, I would have thought that your first campaign would be the one that kind of, doesn't get off the ground, because that's probably when you would have like the least amount of traction. Although I guess pandemics kind of throw a different kind of wrench into the system there.
Yeah, well, I think that maybe the reason that I say we maybe got a little too big for our britches with our failed campaign is that we overreached our reach. I guess we overreached our reach with that one, with sort of the assumption that with every campaign we would necessarily grow our audience.
And how much we would grow our audience.
Right, and how much our audience would be, willing or able to support us. And there were, a few caveats there, like we said, the pandemic being a big one, and another one being that we were introducing a new series. So this is a character. It was for Mr. Guy Zombie Hunter, who we hadn't done anything for him publicly before we launched this campaign. Okay. So, it was an unknown quantity for a lot of people who maybe were, longtime backers of our other projects. They didn't know what this was. And I'm sure that there were other factors involved also, but we thought that the trajectory of people funding things on Kickstarter would necessarily start out small and get bigger every time. And what we learned is that that's not a foregone conclusion. That's not necessarily how it's going to go. And the reason I say all this now in response to what you said is that I think when we started out on Kickstarter, our first campaign, we at that point knew that our reach was going to be small. And we knew that, we might not be in a position where we could raise a whole lot of funding. So we started out very small. And
like $2,000 or something?
It was less than $2,000.
Oh, that's what we made, right?
I think we made less than $2,000.
Really?
I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,300 or $1,500 total for our first Kickstarter, which was for the first issue of Pack, our comic book about vigilante dogs. And honestly, there have been so many campaigns between then and now that I don't really have strong memories of the process that jump right to the fore of my mind. But I think that we started off quite cautiously, and that's a good thing, because that's where we were at that time. So we're looking at it now, and we raised just over $2,000, but it was 134% funded. So my guess is that we set our goal at around 1,500, and we were able to make that. I think that again, these are vague memories that I'm dredging up here, but
we also, by the time we launched our first Kickstarter, we had, that was 2018.
was it?
Yes.
Wow, I thought it was 2017.
It says it right here.
Yeah, I have no
We've
memory.
both been, public and making stuff, and we've been on Facebook since the early days. And
you don't even want to know how long I've been on Facebook.
And I've been on Facebook since you had to have a college email.
Yep, same here.
Yeah. And I mean, that was since MySpace, I've been promoting what I'm working on to an audience, and some of those people that I was friends with on MySpace, I'm friends with on Facebook now, and Twitter and Instagram, and you know what I mean? Like, we didn't really know how to really build a community out of our audience, but we definitely have had, we've been building audiences since the early aughts, so when we did finally go to do a launch in 2018, I mean, we didn't have a mailing list. We didn't have like a way to really reach out to people, but we still had, we still made our goal pretty swiftly.
I do think that there's like if you're a person who is known amongst their circles of friends and family and followers to be a creative person who likes to make things, I think that a modest goal on a first Kickstarter can actually go quite well, because the people who know that you are a maker of things are likely to at least be curious to see, like, you're taking this step, you've been making things, in your house or whatever on your own, or however you've done it. And now you're taking this step into trying to actually bring something to market in an independent way using this platform. And I think that it's a really good way to show people that you're serious about what you're doing, and to let people who are curious about the things you've been making in on that process. I think if we had started out our first goal as, like a 10 grand goal or something, we probably would not have been able to raise that at that point, because we just didn't have the reach as a creative team yet. But, since we started out the goal relatively modest, I think that people who are interested in finding out more about our creative pursuits were like, oh yeah, that sounds reasonable. It seems like they have their heads firmly on their shoulders, and I wonder what this is all about. And so we had really good results.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just in relation to, keeping grounded and like a nice, like, modest goal that seems realistic to hit. I think it was actually through you. I think you guys mentioned to Abstracto, and then Abstracto to me, about the comics launch thing. And so I've been part of the comics launch program in order to do my first Kickstarter. You guys are just doing that now, right? So you did a few before you found comics launch, right?
Yeah, so Pack, our most recent Kickstarter, Pack 1 through 3, that was the first one that we've done since joining Comics Launch, and we're not even done with the classes on Comics Launch yet. Comics Launch is super robust. So there's there's the list launch classes, there's the comics launch classes, there's the ad launch classes. We'd finished list launch, which was amazing. We learned so much.
I haven't gotten to
we got about
yet.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I haven't gotten to automations yet.
Yeah, it's vital. It is so great.
Automations is a lot.
We really it's hard because they're dense and there's a lot of information there. And it is hard. It's like, it's class, it is serious studying, and you have to chain yourself to your desk and read and do the exercises and sometimes re-listen to a module, but we learned so much. We are different human beings now.
Yeah, we have binders full of printouts and worksheets and notes,
everything
that we've taken from list launch and comics launch.
And we're still finishing up comics launch and haven't even started ads launch yet. But here's the big thing. So taking list launch, it didn't necessarily, it wasn't enough to make our last Kickstarter like way huger than our wildest dreams.
Right.
But what it did do is now all 126 of those backers we have a way to capture their attention and keep it captured so that our next Kickstarter will carry them over instead of having to build an audience every time.
Right.
Now we have the ability to take every splash we make and capture it and add it to the previous splash we made. And that's something we did not really know how to do. It was like reinventing the wheel every time we were starting a project. And List Launch really helped us figure out how to move forward with that. So it might not make your immediate next project like way, way, way bigger and way, way, way more successful, but it certainly will help you grow more steadily with a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
Planning for us has been a challenge that taking the comics launch course has really helped us with, because we have numerous different projects. Like we have 3 different ongoing comic book series and an anthology series as well, which we are bringing to Kickstarter for the first time in October. It has been, I think, for me at least, very difficult to feel like I have a plan moving from one Kickstarter into the next Kickstarter, because we're usually pivoting from one audience, for one comic book series to a different audience for a different comic book series, and then pivoting again for the next one. And it can be kind of like whiplash. And when you have whiplash, it's really hard to be thinking ahead to the next Kickstarter after the one that you are currently up to your eyeballs in thinking about and planning for, and just working your butt off during. So I think that for us, one of the most important things that the comics launch courses gave us was sort of a framework that we can start planning ahead while we're engaged with a different project. And for me, that's been a huge, huge improvement. I don't feel like, okay, now this Kickstarter is over. Okay, quick, turn around, reinvent this entire system from the ground up. And I mean, this is yet to be really tried, because we are currently in the process of pivoting to a new project from the last one, but I don't feel as terrified by that process as I used to, and that's huge for me.
I would just add, though, that I still certainly would not suggest that for anyone new to Kickstarter. Like, wait until you have finished fulfilling a project before you even think about your next one.
So now would be a bad time to say that I may already have my second project in the works, and my first campaign has 2 weeks left to go.
Well, I mean, it's not a bad time to have the project in the works. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Like, it's great that you have that project in the works. But in terms of planning your Kickstarter, you really want to wait and see how fulfilling this one goes, and how much it costs you, and how much you're hurting afterwards before you decide what you're going to put into the next one. Because you don't know yet. You might be crying by the time you're done fulfilling this one, or you might be celebrating. You want to know before you go planning your next one.
Right. And you may end up learning things about, well, I think every single Kickstarter, you'll end up learning things about shipping, and about the printer that you're ordering your books from and how they work. And, there's always going to be some unexpected hiccups. And from what I understand, the way that Kickstarter is operating right now is that, especially for folks who are new to the platform, who haven't had a whole lot of experience fulfilling things yet, they're actually not even permitting you to launch a new project until you're at least partway through fulfilling your previous one.
Yeah, I don't think I would actually be launching anything until after fulfillment. In fact, my next project is, I have to edit the script for this noir comic I'm going to be doing. It ballooned up to 84 pages.
Wow.
So kind of, I need to maybe edit that down a little. Otherwise, I won't be done with that until like January.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think one thing I've already learned is that I use Kablam for my printing. I've used them for a while now with just like the things that I've done print on demand and whatnot. And I actually learned after I already like did all of my financing and budgeting and like hit launch on this campaign. I found out they actually do crowdfunding fulfillment. Like I can like if I have things like posters and like prints and things like that, I can like get that stuff either printed by them or printed locally if it's a better price, and then ship it to them, and they'll like package and ship everything for me, which
Wow,
I
that's awesome.
didn't know. And like when I was trying to like get shipping costs and stuff from the USPS, their online thing, like I wasn't sure like how to like figure out like the first class like pricing, because I was like, well, I don't know how much this is all going to weigh, and I don't know what size box to choose and things like that. And so I just took the safer route. The cardboard comic book boxes that I'm going to get off of Amazon, say they ship in a the flat rate legal sized envelope,
Yep.
which is kind of expensive for 2-day shipping, but that's at least a flat rate. Like I know it's $8.25 to ship this thing to like a 2-day shipping. Like I know that, okay, I know that's a number, so I work that into my pledge prices for US people, and then like subtracted that amount for like international so that they didn't have to like pay that $8.25 on top of what they would have to pay for shipping. So like I adjusted it so it's fair for shipping internationally. But like yeah, I think next campaign probably just gonna let Kablam do it for me, because that sounds a lot easier.
Yeah.
Well, so one thing that I think about there is, we have done, this will be our 11th anthology, and we've done 7 other Kickstarter comics. That's not including the anthologies. And then we've also done 2 books outside of that. And we've been through quite a few different printers. And there's a lot to consider. There's a lot of differences there. There's always a learning curve working with a new printer. But at the end of the day, something being 30 cents cheaper per copy can add up to like saving thousands of dollars, depending on how much printing you're doing,
Right.
So someone making it easier for you, it's also a matter of, okay, easier, but at what cost? Is it $3 extra per copy? Because that'll definitely add up, So there's always things to look into and to think about. But honestly, if at the end of the day, you're just trying to get these things fulfilled and move on to the next one as quickly as possible, it might just be worth it to just pay that extra and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, fulfillment services can cost quite a
bit. I mean, they can take almost all of your profit.
But I mean, value looks different to different people.
Right.
For some people, saving those, dollars and cents is way more important than saving oneself, logistical headaches or time. And this, vice versa. So I think, one thing that's actually really important going into a Kickstarter, generally speaking, I think, is knowing your own values and knowing what you're trying to get out of it.
Right.
For some people, it might be making a profit. For some people, it might be building an audience. For some people, it might just be literally getting the thing out into the world. And like Jayel said, just moving on to the next thing. And once you know what your main goal is, you can optimize your campaign and your fulfillment process to do that as well as possible for you. So, if you're just trying to make money and that's your main goal, you can get your costs down to a bare minimum and try to keep as much of the profit as possible. But if you're interested in, being done with it and getting the next thing out, then paying for a fulfillment service might be the perfect answer. I will say that on our end, we've always fulfilled ourselves. Even the one time that we did hire a fulfillment service, we actually, they were local. So we asked if we could come and help them fulfill because we wanted to see how it worked.
Mhm.
And they gave us money off instead of having two of their employees do it. They had us as their employees.
Yeah.
Right.
So they didn't have to pay us because it was our own fulfillment. So
Yeah.
it worked out, you know.
And we ended up paying more than we would have because we had to pay a fee plus all the shipping.
But we learned how to do fulfillment
Yeah.
really efficiently, and that was
Right.
awesome. It was like getting, it was like paying to take a class, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for us, every time that we have fulfilled a campaign, we've learned a little bit more about the process of fulfillment. And you know what works for us and what doesn't, and what's worth trying to fit into the same envelope or the
Yeah.
same box, and what's not. Not to mention like just learning the ins and outs of packaging things, and you know what makes sense to actually put in a mailer with other things and what doesn't. And that's been valuable for us because, you know, as a company that's trying to grow, it's important for us to understand the ins and outs of these things. But, you know, that's not true for everybody. So I'm just putting that in there as, you know,
Well, I
food for
definitely
thought.
think like, I mean, I haven't like gone back and like looked at your other campaigns, but just comparing your pack number 3 to my current campaign, like I feel like, and this is just complete conjecture, like I said, I haven't looked at your other campaigns, but I feel like the things that you have learned in fulfillment might have like allowed you guys to offer all of the extra stuff that you guys offer on your campaign, because you guys have like stickers and postcards and like all this other stuff. Like I'm offering 3 cover variants of the comic. One is a sketch cover. I'm offering mini posters of the 2 cover variants that are the same size as a comic book cover, so I can fit them, you know, in the same bags and boards, right?
Smart.
In the same
Smart.
package. And I'm offering, and this was something that just came out of the blue. I have a sponsor, just for like general sponsor from Legendcraft. And those guys came out with wooden stickers. They're like 2-ply, 2 different wood types, with,
Yeah.
like 3M on the
Cool.
back. And they approached me. They're like, hey, we're like doing this new thing. Saw you had a Kickstarter, like, you interested? And I was
That's really
like,
cool.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw
Like,
those. I was thinking about them. I'm like, man, that's pretty cool.
That sounds really well, like well placed given the theme of your current campaign too. That's
Yeah,
really
right.
cool.
Actually, when
Yeah.
I saw those, I thought about it. We have one of our Children of Gaia books, War and Horses, is kind of also a fantasy western,
Mm.
and I was like, oh man, I really wish that I got our stickers on wood, because I actually, our old stickers, our vinyl stickers,
Are made to look
but
like
they're
wood.
made to look like wood, and I'm like, damn it.
Nice.
We were just ahead of the
Nice.
times.
I mean, you know, remind me after the show. I can set you guys up with with Legendcraft.
Cool.
See if
Yeah, I'll
they'll
check
do
that
some
out.
stuff.
Awesome.
I was
Sorry, I
just,
didn't mean to cut you off with that little.
no, yeah, like you now have me thinking, like, why did I not think of a cowboy hat as a sticker? Because
Aw.
that would have been a simple, like, all of the things that I was suggesting are like very complicated. Like they have to
Yeah.
be rather simple designs, you know,
Sure.
black and white, just 2 color, that's it. Because there
Right.
has to be like positive, negative,
Right.
because they're just 2-ply. But yeah, all of my stuff's like, you know, I'm a rather detailed artist. You know, like I like to do a lot of rendering and things in my inks. So I didn't have like a lot of ready-made really simple things, and I'm just
Right,
thinking
right.
like, crap, like a fucking cowboy hat. It's
Yeah.
just like a band and then the hat. Like,
Right.
damn it. It's a missed opportunity on that one. But you know, next time we do
Yeah.
you know, Osrin West,
Mhm.
that'll, like, yeah. But that's it. The sticker, 2, you know, mini prints, and then the comics. And I'm pretty sure those are my only like actual like physical rewards, you know.
So I can speak to that a little bit. For sure, that's a really smart idea, especially when you're like learning the ropes of this platform.
It's simple.
You want to keep it simple, and you want to knock it out of the ballpark when you fulfill, you know. We have a badge on our profile that's like, and I love badges. I want to collect them all. They're little, like, you know, shining.
Quick tangent. Were you a Boy Scout?
I don't have to answer that. So, you know, like we have the like backer favorite badge, and we got that because we have a proven track record of people loving our fulfillment. And you know, we sometimes still like just get comments like, oh man, I can't wait to the next one. The last one is so awesome. And you know, after the last Kickstarter, we had people writing to us like personal messages, direct messages, just like every time something comes from you guys in the mail, it's a whole experience. Like we all gather around and open it together as a family, and like, you know what I mean? Like it's awesome. Like I love that idea of people being like, oh, the thing came from Oneshi, and all like waiting till after dinner to open it, you know, like that makes me teary-eyed happy. You know, like I want to give people that experience. I want them to have that when they think of us, that's what they think of. That is so vital. And having the control over fulfilling ourselves is part of that. It's part of that to make sure the way we put things in the package so that when someone opens it in size order, they can see the cascade of their rewards. That takes planning and forethought and artistry. It's not just a bunch of stuff in a package. It's a journey that you go through when you're opening this package and when you're pulling out your rewards and the order that the rewards are placed in. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, we have like fulfillment playlists that we play in the house while we're fulfilling to like get ourselves like in the right mood.
Lots of 80s, you know, like power
like
jams.
training montage music, basically.
You know, Cindy Lauper comes on, you know. We put on our leg warmers and start jumping around, you know. But you know, the other thing is like now we're at a point where like, yeah, we can send a multicolor laser etched light up logo lamp, right? Like that's one of our high tier rewards, but it's also an add-on, and a lot of people are getting that add-on. You know,
because it's cool.
We don't make a lot of money off of it, like after shipping and paying to have it made. Like, yeah,
but it's
we
cool.
get a small percentage, but you know what? Now our freaking logo is a big glowing light up thing in someone's room. It looks cool in their room. It makes their room look cooler, you know?
Yeah.
So who doesn't love that? And then other people are like, hey, where'd you get that awesome freaking glowing color changing paw print logo? Like, what is that? And then they look closer and it says packcomic.com on the bottom. And they're like, oh, I got it from this really awesome Kickstarter for this really awesome comic about vigilante dogs. How cool is that? And then they show them the comic and it's like this whole conversation starter, you know? So it's a cool thing. And it's a really cool thing to have. It looks cool in your room, but also, where'd you get that? You know what I mean? A comic in a stack of comics, no one's going to be like, hey, what's the 14th comic in that stack of comics? Where'd you get that? You know what I mean? Like people have a stack of comics on their shelf. It's not lighting up their room the way this lamp is. So even though maybe the lamp might not be a moneymaker, we consider that a loss leader. Like you might lose $1 for each one you sell, but you might gain like 10 new, you know, happy audience members for each one that you sell. So sometimes the loss leaders are, if they're well placed and they're well thought out, those loss leaders could be the most important product in your entire thing, because they could be the one that get you new customers, new audiences, and help you reach new people that are going to love what you have to give them. I mean, you know, we're not conning anyone. We're giving people awesome freaking stuff that they love, that they look at fondly. And I got to tell you, man, I've got one of these lamps next to my computer. I fucking love it. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse. Is that okay? I dropped an F-bomb. All right.
No,
cool.
you're not.
I was trying really hard not to F-bomb, and it just slipped out.
Fucking watch your goddamn fucking mouth. This is a fucking family go up in here.
But you know, bringing it back for a minute to, you know, people who are just getting started on Kickstarter and trying to figure out what to make available in their rewards tiers. I think what Jayel was saying about like making the package opening experience really worthwhile for people. For us, because we've been doing this for several years now, and we've developed really strong relationships with people who, you know, who manufacture the things that we are ordering from them. We're able to do really cool stuff like, you know, the sign, and that's awesome. But when you're just starting out and you may not have, you know, those strong relationships built yet, and you may not have sort of the overhead and the ability to, you know, spend money that you haven't earned yet on, you know, on really cool items like that, I think that fulfilling a simple campaign with a few simple rewards that are packaged really nicely and just look cool as hell and slick when you open up that package, that's really powerful unto itself. Like, you know, keeping it simple has its own merits. And I think, yeah, you know, if you have already looked ahead enough to realize that you want to be able to put like if somebody gets all of the things that are available from your Kickstarter, it can still fit into this envelope. And then if you layer those things within that envelope so that it looks really nice, that is a great experience for the person receiving that package. And that speaks volumes to your ability to fulfill the promises that you made through the Kickstarter. And I think, you know, there's a lot to be said for doing that and doing it well.
Yeah, I never even thought about that level of like the organization of, you know, the actual physical rewards, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's relatively simple to do. You know, you just, as you're putting things in an envelope, think about how it looks when it comes back out, and it actually makes it easier to put things in the envelopes easily and effectively too. If you have sort of like an order in mind, and you can like set up your workspace so that this thing goes first, second, third, fourth, that can actually streamline the process. So everybody wins.
Yeah,
it's the kind of stuff that I think if you were to try to think about everything on your first campaign, you might actually just melt. You know, but like once other stuff starts becoming second nature to you, then you can start thinking about other details that you didn't have the bandwidth to think about before. And then as those details become second nature, that opens up bandwidth for other details. And that's how the growth process happens, right? Like you don't want to like melt yourself by trying to do the whole thing on your first campaign. It's not a good strategy, you know?
So I think in retrospect is probably more beneficial than what I may have realized, that I've already like done a few prints of other comics through Kablam, because like I know their system, I know what I'm gonna get, I know, you know, roughly how long, you know, turnaround is for them, and you know, like I said, I know the quality, I know how the system works, so like that's not anything that I'm worried about for, you know, on top of everything else you have to worry about, you know, on a Kickstarter campaign.
Right. Yeah,
I think we used Kablam.
We used Kablam for our Tracy Queen sampler. Yeah, we did an 8-page sample of Tracy Queen before deciding to publish it ourselves, and we used that to shop it around to other publishers. We got a lot of really good feedback on it, but ultimately at the end of the day, most of our feedback was pretty much,
this is too weird.
It's too sexy to be on our not sexy shelf, but it's not sexy enough to be on our sexy shelf. It was like, because Tracy Queen is an adult performer, but it's not a pornographic comic book. There's not actually pornography in the comic. So it wasn't spicy enough to be on the spice rack, you know, but it was too spicy for like the cream of wheat rack, you know.
Right.
And it just kind of, everyone was like, we don't know what to do with this. So that became part of our ethos for, you know, Oneshi Press, is like finding a place for things that are a little, that break the mold, that shatter taboos, that walk the line, that, turn tropes around and kind of leave you going like, wow, that I did not expect that. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we do.
Yeah. You needed some place for like the medium salsas of the world.
Yeah, right. Right. Or things that like have like little pockets of pepper, but like aren't entirely homogeneously spicy, like
right. Somewhere between watercress and Carolina Reapers.
Or like a salad with watercress, but like every now and then a little chunk of like, some hot pepper in there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, now I'm just hungry. So
yeah,
thanks.
me too. I sorry. Maybe I'm just hungry. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Food metaphors always come out when we're hungry, right?
It's true.
It's yeah, so like and we mentioned earlier sort of like getting in on the ground floor, like your first like first Kickstarters and stuff, and we're talking about like the planning and everything, and we were talking about keeping like a grounded sort of like a level-headed goal in mind. I would doing the comics launch thing, there was a lot of formulas or algorithms, I don't know what you'd call them, equations, I guess, that kind of like take into account like your audience, your potential reach, and then it like spits out like a dollar range for you. So I think mine was like 12 to 1500 or something, and I just picked something on the low end for my first goal. But I had that guidance. What if you guys remember, like in your first few campaigns before you guys took the course, what was sort of like your leading ethos to like come up with something that was more reasonable instead of going after that $10,000 goal that we mentioned was probably like a star shot in the beginning?
If I remember right, we actually got a quote for printing for a small run, like what we thought like a small batch of printing would be, like 250 books or something, and we got a quote for that and tried to just estimate how much it would cost for shipping, and that was that. We were just like, all right, so like $1,000 for the books, $500 for shipping, cool, $1,500, that's our goal, and it was really that simple.
Yeah, we just hoped for the best, really. And it worked out. It worked out fine.
It didn't leave us anything, left over, but like,
yeah, I don't think we
it
really
left us with books left over that we continued to sell.
Yeah, we didn't really get paid for that.
Right.
But we did end up with a whole lot of stock that we were able to sell at conventions, and over the years they've gone into rewards for other Kickstarters, and they've gone up on our online store. And so probably in the end we did get paid. It was just more of a long-term setup.
Gotcha. Okay. I feel like that probably would have been my line of thinking as well. I actually originally had planned on doing a small run of books, but that was before I had this idea of doing a Kickstarter exclusive cover variant that you can only get by backing this and future Osrin West books that are all going to be like, I've seen a lot of comics do it, but the one that pops to my head was the I think it was like issue 100 of The Walking Dead. They had like 8 variant covers and you could set them all next to each other and they made like one big mural.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm doing that, just continuously
really
adding
cool.
a new cover to the right hand side of the previous book.
It's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
And when I came up with that
Batman's
idea,
gonna be in the third one, right?
Yeah, totally gonna be on the second cover. Definitely.
The second cover, right.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember I don't know where I saw that rumor, but
Yeah, no,
yeah.
definitely definitely not kickstarter.com/project/Voltramart/auction west, definitely not there. um but yeah, I think like originally I was like going to do like 100-200 books, something like that, with just one cover. But then I was like, I was gonna like number them all and everything. um but when I came up with the idea of like the alternate cover, I was like, how do I do that with two covers? It became too complicated.
Yeah.
And so now my goals, each funding, like each pledge level, covers the cost of production and shipping within the United States.
For that
And
individual.
yeah, for that individual pledge level. And same
Right.
thing for the add-ons, like they
So you're
each
not
cover
left
production.
with books left over though.
Right. I'm not left with anything left over. I'm only producing like what is needed to fund this particular, like fulfill this
Sure.
particular Kickstarter. But there is that little bit of extra on the back end that, as you can see on the page, if we hit our big stretch goal, which right now we would still have to double what we've already made to like hit that final stretch goal. um, Almost all that extra money is going to be going towards hiring on artists for the next anthology.
Right.
Like I
Right.
did the 3 main stories in this issue, and I did a stretch goal story that we still haven't unlocked yet. But then I got Mr. Abstracto and Mick Byers on board to do stretch goal stories as well. And I would really like it if future issues, instead of having me do all the stories in them, we can like reach out to other people and have them do short stories for it as well.
Awesome.
So like
Nice.
that's like sort of a big, like, where my profits are going in all of these things.
Sure.
But
Well,
yeah, I definitely think it worked out on the back end in order to be able to do that instead of trying to fund like X number of books. It's more just like, well, no, we'll just fulfill what we need to and
yeah.
wrap that rest of the profits into the next book.
Well, the other thing about that might be smart, honestly, is that if it does get picked up by another publisher, they might want their logo on it, which would require a reprint anyway. So a lot of people are like, ooh, I'm going to get 10,000 copies of my first book printed. And it's like literally next month, that could be like 9,950 useless copies.
Yeah.
Or you find a mistake or something you didn't know about printing because you've never done it before. You know what I mean? Like, it's probably better to like learn
Right.
with a little bit less liability. And then, as you really become sure of what you're doing, then you could pick up that extra liability of having a lot of stock on hand.
Yeah. And I kind of already accidentally learned that lesson in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah. Let's hear about that.
So the now no longer canon original story arc for the Ozran Tales, which is my medieval fantasy, like your standard, like, this just feels like a D&D campaign kind of thing. Like,
Right.
it's not genre mashing at all. The first issue of that was my well, I actually did it the first semester of my senior year. And I never actually completed issue 2 while I was still in school. So the first issue became my entire senior project when I was getting my bachelor's of fine arts. But for the show, because we had to do like a final like gallery show, not only did I like produce each individual page of finished artwork as like, oversized prints, to hang on the wall. I also had like comics available for people to buy, and I think I produced somewhere on the order of like 100 books total. I think I got like 50 for that, and then I think another 50 because I was doing a Comic-Con, like a local con,
Yeah.
later on that year. And I sold a handful of them. I also had like another gallery show where like I showed the full size, pages and stuff. Um and I've also given away a bunch of copies, but I still have like 50 books just sitting around that
Sure.
I have no idea how to offload because I mean, pandemics aside, like I wasn't getting a lot of traction at shows because
Yeah.
I only had the one book. I
Right.
don't do I don't do one-off artworks. Like I don't do character portraits and stuff of like, Superman or like, Black Cat or Spider-Man or anything like that to just have available for people. Like I don't do that. I'm bad at designing t-shirts and stickers and cool, like, oh man, that's a cool singular image that's on a piece of merch. Like that's not what my brain does, right? Like I come from a film background and my brain works in sequential storytelling. And so
Mhm.
like all I had was the book, and nobody ever stops when I do cons. They're just, even no matter how much I try and engage them, like reaching out, like, hey, how you doing? Things like that. They just kind of either completely ignore me or they like look at me as if to say, why are you talking to me? And then they keep walking. And like,
Yeah, that's the thing. I get that a lot.
like even when I have like a cool little, freebie kind of like print of something, that has like, the QR code to like my link tree on it, they don't even take that and it's free. And so I just like I I think that kind of experience of like getting a bunch of these things printed, selling like maybe 10 or 12 copies at my senior show, and then selling like another 10 or 12 copies, you know, since then. And I graduated in 2018. And then giving away another like 20 copies to like friends and family and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I still have like half of my inventory and I don't know what to do with it.
Well,
So like I don't want to like sit on a bunch of shit either,
Yeah,
so
that's totally legit. I mean, different sales channels work better or worse for different people. And this is actually something that I think I just saw a Facebook post from Russell Nolte about the other day. And he does indie comics. He is a self-published novel author.
he's going to be in our next anthology.
Yeah, he's going to be in our next anthology. He's kind of like
Any relation to Nick Nolte?
no, spelled differently. Um, and I don't know, he has a lot of wisdom. He's been doing this kind of stuff for
Yeah,
a while.
he's super
And
cool about sharing it too.
yeah, and he made a post the other day about how different platforms work differently for different people, and that if you can find the one that works for you, it'll be life changing and career changing and really affirming. But that you got to try a bunch of different things to figure out what works for you. Like, we've done a bunch of cons and we're still sort of working out our con game and trying to figure out what might work better for us. But we also have not had great success at conventions. And there's a variety of reasons that we can pin down for that. But there's also just some like, I don't know, we're just maybe not very great at tabling at conventions. And maybe we will keep trying and we'll find the right formula that makes it work for us. Maybe we won't. And similarly, like some people are really fantastic at putting together like a Gumroad or an Etsy and selling their stuff there. Some people are really great at running very successful Kickstarters and making the majority of their sales there. Some people, will end up doing the retailer, getting into Diamond and being sold at retail stores route. Like there's so many different possibilities now that although I think it's exhausting to try all of them, there's usually going to be something that works somehow for you out there. You're just going to figure out which one it is and then, work that as hard as you can. And I think that a lot of people who make indie comics right now are finding that Kickstarter is a viable way to make and sell comics and then move on to the next one. And the cool thing about Kickstarter is that you can find ways to scale it so that you can print literally exactly the number that you need to fulfill that Kickstarter and have 10 extra copies for your own use. Or you can print, 1,000 extra copies if you work the numbers right and get those onto retail shelves or take them to cons or whatever works for you. But I really, really do appreciate that about the Kickstarter platform, is that you can tailor the experience to get what you need out of it. And that can be your main sales channel if that's how you want to play it. Or if you find out that you're not the best at Kickstarter, but you're really great at cons, you can make them work together like that. And I think, we're still we've done this successfully 7 times, and we're still kind of trying to figure out what our ideal strategy is and where we work best. But without Kickstarter, we wouldn't have made it this far, that's for sure.
Right. I guess my favorite thing about Kickstarter is just the decentralization of not just, small publishing, but everything really.
Everything.
I'm, obviously me being comic book guy, everybody that I'm having on as part of, this little series I'm doing about Kickstarter stuff are also comics people. But I was backed by someone the other day, see if I can find them here, who had an insane number. They here 704 projects backed. So I was like, wow. I went to they have spent money on 704 projects, and I went to their page just to see who is this person, where did they come from, right? And the cool thing about Kickstarter is they have this little pie chart that little colored slices of the pie chart to show you what the person has, what categories they funded and how many in each thing they've done. They have done everything except for dance, and I was like, wait, dance is a category on Kickstarter? You can do what do you even
I'm gonna send you this dance
about
this dance in the mail. Please accept this dance that I have mailed to you.
Look, guys, we need to pay 200 dancers for a flash mob, okay?
I mean, that's awesome. That's awesome. Why not?
Yeah, there's obviously things like crafts and comics and art and publishing, but then there's food is a section, fashion is a section. There's all this technology, people kickstarting video games or apps or little dongles and stuff for their, and it's just a crazy thing. And I, not to get overly political, but I'm a borderline anarchist. I don't like the current state of the Libertarian Party in the United States, but what I identify with the libertarians is the liberty side, the freedoms, as few rules and laws as possible. I obviously recognize the need for them, but come on, man, don't chain me down. And that's what I really like about Kickstarters. You can do what you want. I mean, there's a few guidelines, you can't run raffles and things like that on there, or collect for charity.
Right.
But if you want to run a Kickstarter that's just hey, I'm trying to make some prints of this photo I took of my kid picking boogers, you can do that just as easily as probably trying to raise the funds to build a skyscraper in Chicago.
Right.
It's an insane kind of decentralizing of the just how to get things made in general. And I think it's awesome.
Well, the cool Sorry, I was just gonna say the cool thing about that is you can really build your own strategies.
Right.
One that I was actually gonna mention is, in terms of being like left over with stock, right? Like our 7th successful Kickstarter, we're going to be sending people comics that we printed on our first Kickstarter. Right. Our first Kickstarter was pack 1. Our 7th Kickstarter was pack 1 through 3. Some of those people are getting all 3 issues, and some of those issues are coming from our first Kickstarter. So we actually have a room that is just comics. Like pretty much the walls are lined with shelves holding boxes of all of our stuff. I mean, we've done 11 anthologies, 7 comics and 2 books. Like, it's
How
quite a bit.
close are you to needing to get like offsite storage? Like,
very,
we need it. We just have to figure out how to work it into our budget. Like, we already do need it.
We've been talking about it for a while, and we're getting to the point where something's got to give.
Yeah.
Like, either we need to move everything else out of that room and figure out how to reorganize our space, or we need to move, or we need to get some storage space somewhere.
But even if we're ordering like 1,000 of something, our printer, Max at Short Run Printing, shout out to Max. Max is freaking awesome.
We love you, Max.
Sometimes I'll just talk to him on the phone for like an hour, and like just strategizing. And he's so helpful. Like, he's just amazing. And one of the things that's really cool is pretty much up until that, 1,000 or 2,000 issue mark where it makes sense to switch to offset printing. Like, their printing is definitely, as far as I could find, the cheapest game in town. And it's super high quality. But there's like no bells and whistles, no frills. Their site is like bare bones.
It's like 1998, Colin.
But
that speaks to my
I can talk to him and he'll help me set up custom
Yeah.
orders. And one of the things is like, if I wanted to get 950 copies with the regular cover and then 50 copies with a variant cover, it's basically the $30 setup fee, regardless of how many copies I want. It costs $30 for a variant cover. And they do gang printing. They print all the insides at once. So they'll print 1,000 copies of the comic and then just 950 copies of this cover and 50 copies of that cover. And I can have 30 different variant covers. It's just a one-time setup fee for each variant, and that's it. So it's
cool.
very affordable, very reasonable, but that's not something that you can navigate and figure out on the website. You have to be willing to call and talk to people and be like, hey, I'm trying to do this. How do you do that? Some sites like literally do not have customer service, and there's no humans you can talk to. You get what you order, and if you messed up, that's on you.
Right.
That sucks, but thankfully here's a site where like I can call and talk to the person and be like, hey, so this is what I want to do. What do you think is the best way to do that? And we can strategize about it and figure it out. And it's like, it's amazing. It's really super cool and really super helpful. But you have to be willing to like really think about what you're going for and why, and be able to like ask around and talk to people and have those conversations and figure out the best way to do it.
Spend all this time building him up, and then you lose all of the Zennials when you say you have to talk to them on the phone.
It's an old man's game.
If
I learned that strategy back in the 1900s.
If I've learned anything
from
writing Tracy Queen about a woman who makes a cyborg army instead of like talking to people, it's that sometimes you got to just talk to people.
Right? Oh man. Yeah, I think like I've had a very similar experience with customer service at Kablam. Like, I've never like called to like talk to them and have like an hours long conversation, but like I've been like really, really pleased with like the feedback and the help that I have gotten from
That's
them.
awesome.
Yeah.
But oh man, there was something I was gonna say, and now I don't remember what I was gonna say.
It's probably about cyborgs.
Probably. They're gonna
It's
rule the
always
earth
about
one day.
cyborgs.
They're gonna rule the well. Like, when you say cyborg, do you
I need to step away
mean
from
like
them.
humans that have been augmented, or do you mean like fully autonomous AI robots?
Well, the Tracy Queen cyborg situation is actually A, completely junk science. Like wouldn't actually work. And B, totally ridiculous. So she decides that she needs an army to protect her. And she happens to be like a biochemical genius, and her best friend, who is a talking raccoon, happens to be an engineering genius. So what they do, oh, and Tracy is also a porn star. So what they do is they collect genetic samples from the scenes of her adult films. And then they make living tissue out of the genetic samples and combine the living tissue with robotics to create these cyborgs. So the junk science is that, like, obviously you can't do that because sexual reproduction requires more than one half of the equation to actually create living tissue. Like, you can't take semen and actually make living tissue out of it, at least with any of the technology that we have right now. But so that's where the junk science comes in. We just kind of gloss over that. I think I wrote something into the script to show that she's grappling with that idea, but that she has an idea, and then, voila, there's cyborgs.
Right.
But that's based on a whole brainstorm that I had, because for a while in my 20s, I was reading a lot about human sexual evolution and why humans may or may not have evolved the way that they did sexually. And this is a very speculative field. Like, nobody really knows why anything evolves the way that it does or not. But it was really interesting. And I was reading about female sexual response and how there's all this debate in the scientific community about why women, like female humans, even experience sexual pleasure, because it's not technically required for reproduction. And I don't know, the theory that I developed over reading about this for quite a while is that promiscuous women are actually badasses because they are increasing their chances of having a major effect on the species by having a larger genetic footprint in the long run. So then I became obsessed with porn stars who specialize in gangbangs, because I was like, okay, so if we take the idea that promiscuous women are the badasses of the species, and then we look at women who do gangbangs, like, and instead of, denigrating them for their choice, we say, wow, what a badass thing to do. That totally changes the equation. So I ended up writing a graphic novel about a woman who, like, skips the whole, by the way, you have to get pregnant and carry the baby to term to actually leave your genetic footprint on the human race. What if she just skips that step and makes an entire army that is literally her, I guess technically the way that she does it, it's not actually her genetic offspring, but she is creating this race of cyborg clones with the intent of making her mark on the human species. So that's a really long-winded response to your question. But
no,
I can hear
that's
listeners.
honestly the kind of stuff that we like to talk about here on Thought Balloons. We haven't talked about sexual reproduction specifically, but like, I've talked to people about like philosophy. We've talked about like the DIY punk aesthetic. We've talked about like occult magic on this channel. I talked to a good friend of mine, was finishing up nursing school at the beginning of the pandemic, and he was in like the practical sections of that and working in hospitals at the beginning of the pandemic. Like, Thought Balloons isn't like, it may be a comic book reference, but it's more about thoughts and just talking about the things that interest us. Like, I think that's like really fascinating. I actually have Two follow-ups to that, like on the same line. First is, and I'll just say these questions like back to back so I don't forget to ask one of them. But the first one, you're talking about just like the science of like reproduction and like DNA and stuff. I was watching a video, and I've heard about this before, but SciShow on YouTube just came out with an episode, I think yesterday or the day before, about the diminishing and the possible disappearance of the Y chromosome and what
yeah.
that is going to kind of entail. So part A would be, have you like, what are your thoughts on that? And then the second part is, you're talking about gangbangs and multiple partners. I don't know if it's true. My mythology and like lore about different kind of like ancient cultures is kind of fuzzy, but I think it was like the Norse, like Vikings, I think, thought that having multiple partners would imbue the child with the best aspects of all of the people that like helped make that kid, right?
Yeah.
So like, what are you like, do you know anything about those two topics?
Oh, well, I mean, not a whole lot. I have heard also the rumors about the Y chromosome possibly becoming rarer, but I haven't really looked into it. I just haven't had the time and the bandwidth to really go down that particular rabbit hole. But I mean, from where I'm sitting, I'm like, all right, bring it on. Like, let's see what happens. I don't feel like I have too much of a personal stake in that as a non-reproducing person with two X chromosomes. So I don't have a whole lot to say on that. But if you have read more about it, I'm interested to hear what you know, because like I said, I haven't done a whole lot of research on it.
Or if you don't want to paraphrase, we can also watch that episode.
Yeah, I love SciShow.
The basic thing on that episode was he talked about like a bunch of different things. First, there isn't just XY.
Right.
There's like ZW pairings and like other things as well. I think platypuses have like 10 like sex chromosomes, and they're like pairs of 5s, I think is what it is. Or it's 20 and they're pairs of 10. Like, I don't remember which one it is, but it's like, how does that work if you have like, because apparently they like pair up like XY, 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 right? And it's just like pairs like that. But like, what happens if you have like 3XX and 2XY? Like, I don't know. They didn't get into that, but they were talking about like the Y chromosome keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller as like it, they think it was like a piece of DNA that like in the meiosis process didn't get like recombined with like whatever strand it originally was like a part of, and became its own thing. And it keeps getting smaller and smaller as time goes on, and they think eventually it's just going to disappear. And when it disappears, the current theory is that organisms are just going to convert to something else, maybe ZW, maybe something else. And they're studying different things that have gone through this process. And something that I found was like really fascinating is that they're looking at some frogs. I think it was frogs they were looking at, that some are like same kind of species of frog. I think it was in Japan, but like in the south they're XY, and in the north they're ZW, and somewhere in between they obviously had to switch. But I think they said that like when that switch occurs, organisms tend to go to environmental based like sex assignment. So like sea turtles, like if it's above a certain temperature, they all produce females. If it's below a certain temperature, they all produce males. And if it's within that range, it's like an equal amount of males and females. So like imagine a day when humans can actually control the outcome of a pregnancy just by like sleeping in a refrigerator. or something. You know?
Better get your hat or we'll have all boys.
Like, yeah, this seems really wild to me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Now I'm definitely gonna watch that video and
Yeah, it
go
was
down that
really
rabbit hole at some
cool.
point. Huh.
I think, you know, one of the weird things that comes up a lot of times, especially in like academic views or like quasi-academic or para-academic views on science and biology, where it refers to like women, you know, the female body and female reproductive system, is there's always like the, well, how can that even be real? What is the purpose of that? And it's like, what is the purpose? Have you looked around? Like, there is literally, what is the purpose of anything in the universe?
Right.
Like, what is the purpose of rock? What is the purpose of stars? What is the purpose of waking up and eating? Like, what do you mean?
Right.
What is the purpose of living? Like,
Yeah.
it's so weird that like we specifically tend to apply that to that conversation. Like, well, what would the purpose of female ejaculation be? It must not be real. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, what do you mean the purpose? Like,
Well, I mean,
what?
the scientific perspective that we have on most things, especially biology, is still so limited. Like, you know, just based on like, even at the point when I was in high school and we were learning about sexual reproduction, I'm sure that the scientific community at large knew way more than what I was being taught.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, it's the trickle
Yeah.
down.
Right. And so like, but you know, that's just how it works, is that the people at the ground level, like most general human beings, don't know the nuances, don't know that much. And even within the scientific community, we're still operating on principles that, you know, basically came from Darwin, like 170 years ago or something, where he came up with an idea that worked at the time and still has many important principles
Sure.
that we draw from.
Sure.
But we now understand that the field of scientific inquiry is so much vaster and more complicated than the principles that he set down. And like the fact that we're talking about chromosomes that are not just X and Y at all also like points to the fact that, you know, for people who get into the fundamentals of X and Y as the basis for gender based on chromosomal sex, have no idea what they're talking about, because that shit is
Right.
complicated. There is so much more variation in the world and even within the human species about what informs the way that our bodies
Right.
develop and operate, and the way that our brains act, and the way that we identify as far as gender. Like there is so much more there than this binary that we have been taught. And it's kind of exciting to think that our chromosomal makeup might be changing, because as that develops, there will necessarily be more literacy around these concepts that will trickle down into the general population. And we may possibly, fingers crossed, end up being a more accepting and open-minded species if
Get
this
out of
information-
town.
I said fingers crossed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. But
You hippie.
So like
I
to go
know.
back to the you're talking about like, well, why does it, like, what's the function, what's the purpose of this? I think like a lot of people, no matter what field you're in, you get so engrossed in the like hyper specifics or like the advanced, you know, and like, you know, expert level concepts that you kind of, you tend to lose like the base concepts of things sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, there doesn't need to be a purpose. Evolution isn't a linear thing of we start at one point and we perfectly walk down a path to
Yeah.
the end result. Shit can come up because
A
of
lot of
just variation and random mutation. And if it isn't detrimental to an organism to the point that it, you know, kills that organism before they can pass their genes on, then those things propagate. You know, it's like, why does there have to be like, why do we have to have 4 fingers and two, like, you know, and a thumb on each hand, you know. Why
Wait,
do
are
we
you
have,
saying my thumbs aren't fingers?
like
not.
they're not, they only have two joints. The fingers have three joints.
Man,
Jayel is staring at his thumbs now.
I've got a joint on my thumb that's like right by my wrist. So I don't
yeah,
know.
but you also have the same joint on all of your fingers
You're-
at your wrist.
so
It's the muscles that allow your thumb to be opposable, not the joint. Anyway, point being is like science, like in this specific example, right? Like scientists are very like, why does it, like, what's the purpose? Well, the purpose is that it was a random thing that happened and wasn't detrimental to us, so it's just here. You could
Yeah.
consider it, you know, air quotes, vestigial, right? Like it's just there. It doesn't, you know, it's not negative. You know, it may not serve a specific quote unquote purpose, or like at
Right.
least we may not know what its purpose is yet. But like,
Or it may
also,
just
does there
be that-
have to be? You
or it may
know?
have just been considered very attractive.
and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, then you go into like throat waddles, like colorful throat waddles. There's some birds that are like, ooh, your throat waddle's not colorful enough. I'm not gonna partner with you.
Right.
You know, and it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but why do I need a colorful throat waddle? Because I like it. Well, why do you like it? Because I like it. Okay. You know,
Yeah.
and like that's it.
Yeah.
If she wants a freaking colorful throat waddle, I mean, that's just how it is, you know?
Well, I think that this
Exactly.
will go down in history as the podcast where somebody said colorful throat waddle the most times.
Hopefully.
So we've achieved that.
Yes.
Check it off the list.
Well, let's say it a
put
few
us
more
in the
times.
book.
Wait, what
Um,
was your second question? We totally
oh
down.
yeah. The other thing that I was like I had mentioned was just when it comes to, like, you were talking about how badass women are, like promiscuous women,
Oh,
because they're
right,
like spreading their possibly spreading their genetic code more efficiently. I just brought up, I think, honestly, I think where I found this piece of information was in a show about Vikings, and they had talked about how Vikings had this idea that every partner, so obviously this was one woman and multiple men, but they thought, like, you know, if, you know, Gary was like super strong, you know,
right.
and
Gary the
you
Viking.
know, he had, well, I don't want to move into territory of like getting names wrong and things like that, right?
I like it.
We just say like Gary the Viking, super strong, and like Terry the Viking is like super smart, and Perry the Viking is like really tall, and you want a really strong, tall, smart Viking. Well, then Gary, Perry, and Terry all, you know, mate with Mary the Viking, and, you know, have a strong, tall, smart kid, because they
Named
thought that, like, named
Harry.
Derry. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, they
Gary's
thought
very
that, like,
hairy, which means that maybe Harry was also involved in the mix.
maybe, yeah, you know, but they thought like all of the positive traits from every partner involved in creating that pregnancy, like, got passed on, right? They didn't know that only one sperm was fertilizing one singular egg, and that's not how it worked. But there are interesting kind of like cultural, like,
Yeah.
ideas behind female promiscuity.
Right.
One thing to speak about there though is in terms of like you know, actual like polyamory, where there might be, you know, an extended nucleic family, right? That might have multiple partners. It's like, in raising a kid,
Mhm.
sure, that kid is gonna get like some traits from all the people that raised them,
Yeah.
you know, and socially that kid might get the benefit of the best of all of their
Right,
parents, and
yeah.
that's pretty cool, you know, like that's
Yeah.
a thing.
it's my understanding that there are a number of cultures from around the world that have this a similar way of looking at it. And they do tend to be cultures that, aren't mean to women, which is cool. And Vikings, it does appear, were pretty cool with letting women do what the hell they wanted, more or
Right.
less. And obviously there's a lot of smaller subcultures within Viking that, not everybody had the same belief system, but I have definitely heard of similar ideas from multiple cultures. And I think that, like Jayel said, a lot of the benefit there is that then you end up with more people in the community feeling responsible for contributing to the well-being of that child.
Right.
And you end up with a stronger knit community because they're all invested in taking care of at least this one child, possibly many more children. And you end up, I think, with stronger families and stronger individuals who feel supported in communities like that. So yeah, I had actually never heard that about Vikings before, but I have heard about it in other communities from various places. So I think it's pretty cool. And I also think it's really awesome to know that there are cultures out there that don't think that women enjoying sex with multiple partners are evil.
Right.
That's heartening to hear, because I think it's pretty universal that there's always going to be women in any group who like to have sex with people, and it's cool to think that that's not always a bad thing everywhere and at every time.
Exactly. And getting you to like you're talking about I think Jayel brought up like polyamory and like multiple parents and things.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a conversation I was having with my father a couple days ago. I forget what the context of the overall conversation was, but like I had mentioned something, and it was funny to like see him kind of be offended by this, but I had mentioned like, you know, I said to him, I was like, you're not the only person who raised me. Like, you're not the only person who had an effect on my life when I was growing up, because, I'm fairly progressive, like if I'm being not politically conservative, but if I'm being conservative with my political views, I align as like a social libertarian, like a lot of like I said earlier, less rules the better, but the rules I like are the ones that like bring equality and equity to everybody. So I'm definitely like on the left side. On the extreme side, I'm an anarcho-socialist, like my dad is a Republican, so we have like very differing political views, and it's one of these things of like he wasn't the only person to have an effect on me, and
Yeah.
he got kind of offended by the idea that like I wasn't raised by him and my mom. I was like, but I had to like explain. I was like, were your parents the only people in your life that had an effect on you? Like,
Right.
did any of your peers like at any point ever say anything that made you think, oh yeah, that's a good idea, let me adopt that into my like daily
Yeah.
ethos? Or did they do or say something that you're like, that's fucked up, let me not do that? What
Mhm.
about teachers? What about your
Right.
priest? What about your scoutmaster? Like,
Yeah.
there's so many people in our daily lives that affect how we like learn and grow and like decide to like live our lives, like where we like get our specific moral compass from. It's not just our two in our American society, our two parents for that nice white picket fence, two car garage you know
Yeah.
kind of family unit. Like, there's so many other people that affect our lives anyway. It's almost ridiculous to me to think how like people are against like polycules and things like that, and
Yeah.
like it's just like, what?
Yeah.
No. Like, that's
It's
good, what are you talking about?
right. And it seems like, a larger group of people who all have more or less vetted each other already, so that they
Mhm.
they share similar goals and values, like all having a vested interest in the well-being of a child seems to me like a net good.
Right. Yeah.
But that's me. Clearly I don't speak for everybody, but it sounds to me like a good idea. And given that, like, throughout most of human history, most cultures operated that way. So you had an extended family,
Mhm.
that all came together to raise the children. And it takes a village, as they say. Like, I think it comes pretty naturally to us to operate in that way, one
Yeah,
way
I
or
think at
another,
the end
whether
of the
it's
day, it's just like an argument of semantics and like labeling, really,
yeah.
which is a ridiculous argument to have, in my opinion.
Well, all right, we solved that one. Feel good
Right?
about
Yeah,
that.
solving.
Bring us your next mystery.
We're solving social issues here on Thought Balloons. Yeah, no, I think that's like a pretty good we started with talking about Kickstarter, ended, talking about progressive social views and, lots of talk about fucking and having kids. That's honestly how these things tend to go.
I try to work gangbangs into as many conversations as possible.
I respect that and support it and encourage it. So at the end of these podcasts, I usually go to this list of questions that we get from our Patreon supporters first and foremost, but also we now have a channel because we're running short on questions from Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/Folsham_art. You can support the podcast there and get your questions put at the top of this list. But we like to have a little listener question section at the end of the podcast. We only have one left on the Patreon side of things. So if you join the Discord, links will be somewhere. You can also just submit things if you're not a Patreon supporter. Patreons, they do get moved to the top of this list, but we have one question left, and I think this is just a nice sort of general question here. We've had things ranging from what's the best sandwich to what's your favorite smell, or who would win in a fight, your dad or mine. Today is not such a ridiculous question. But I think it's actually a really good fit for the conversation we did have today. This comes yet again from Cascadia on Patreon. What do you think people should know?
Hi, Cascadia.
Hi.
Shout out.
What do you think people should know?
Yeah, do you have like any
That's-
little nuggets of wisdom that you want to share with the people?
There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. I think people should know that no matter what you know, you can't really know that what you know is actually known. Just don't take it for granted. Always be looking to learn and grow and adjust. That's what I think.
Wow.
Like it.
Jeez. Well, now I feel like I have to match that in scope. But I feel like it's more on brand if I go for some just strange factoid. So I'm gonna dig deep here. Based on what we were just talking about, here's an interesting one. Graham crackers and corn flakes were both invented to curb masturbation.
Really?
Yep, that was the philosophy of the guy behind graham crackers, and I can't remember his full name, but his last name was Graham, obviously, and Mr. Kellogg, whose first name I also can't remember, who invented corn flakes. They
really were upset about
They
masturbation.
were really, really upset about masturbation, and they both thought that having a diet of mostly bland foods would make people less excitable and make them want to touch themselves less. So they invented bland foods and put them on the market.
I love graham crackers.
Me too.
Hasn't worked. Um, yes. Interesting. Gary Graham and Carrie Kellogg. Weird dudes, made some pretty good food. Yeah, no, and I think my thing is we have been talking about some weird kind of heady philosophical stuff. I was just watching a video about simulation theory, and this is something that a lot of people have an opinion about simulation theory, but I definitely align in this. Whether or not our reality is a simulation, it doesn't matter, people. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Our reality is real enough to us that just even if it is a simulation, what you gonna do with that knowledge? Just live your life as if it's real. It may be fun to think about, but at the end of the day, even if we were in a simulation, they would have to specifically program an individual to be able to affect the simulation on like a higher level to like quote unquote escape. You're not going to be able to do that
You're
without
probably not
some
Neo.
divine intervention. So just live your life, be the best you can be. We're not all Neo.
Exactly. Totally agreed. I feel like at the end of the day, we can't ever prove what is real or what is not, but we can look around us and see that human pain and suffering and the pain and suffering of other beings is for all intents and purposes real. And I don't think that we should be able to just escape that because we don't believe that it's real. Like it's happening. And if you can do anything to help, then I think that's the only thing that really matters. I think that's my philosophy.
The real bottom line there is, there are constructs, and those constructs aren't real or not real. It's who we are that is real. Right. And if who we are adheres to constructs or doesn't adhere to constructs, that's still us being our authentic selves. And authenticity is the closest thing we can come to real, and I think that's the bottom line.
Let me get real with you.
Well, I think it's the existentialist versus nihilist philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. Where a nihilist thinks like there is no meaning to the universe and therefore nothing matters. An existentialist thinks, well, yeah, there's no rhyme or reason, everything's random, and the universe may be this cold and uncaring thing, but you can find meaning through your own actions and what you choose to do with your time here. You can impart the meaning yourself. Mm-hmm. Very last thing, I like to give the very end of the podcast for some promo stuff. So what do you guys got going on? Where can people find you on the internet?
Always at oneshipress.com. ONESHIPRESS.com. There's links to pretty much everything we're doing there. Once you're at oneshipress.com, that is a great place to sign up to our mailer, and our mailer is super hecking cool. We are giving out free comics, free anthologies, free artwork, free updates all the damn time, just because we love our audience that much and want to keep them.
It also looks nice.
Oh, thank you.
Like, it's not just like, hey, I typed some stuff into the default format. Like, nice headers, like nice backgrounds. Like, you guys take like a lot of care into like the presentation of the mailer. Something that I don't do because I'm lazy, and graphic design was my worst class in school.
You know what? That was also true for me. As a visual storyteller, I always said like, oh, I'm just not good at t-shirts. I'm not good at stickers. I'm not good at logos. And now we have hundreds of t-shirts, stickers, and logos. And I make logos for all of my projects. And honestly, it was just something that wasn't where I was at until it became where I was at. you know, and as you do more projects and each project has to have a logo, and then you force yourself to make a logo for that project, and then sooner or later you start going, well, shit, now every freaking area in my story, in my world building, they all have their own flags with crests on them. And damn, I've done a lot of logos. You know, before you know it, it becomes something you do.
I think the
Also-
height of design aesthetic was the Stussy S.
Was the what? The Stussy hat?
The Stussy S, the little you draw the three
Yeah.
three vertical lines and then
Oh.
3 more underneath, and you do the little
Yeah.
like diamond S. You know the
Brilliant.
So you say Stussy? I always said Stussy. I
Mhm.
guess that was like the skateboard company in like the early 90s, late 80s,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had
which
a-
actually they didn't invent it. I was like watching a thing about that, but
Oh,
yeah,
really?
yeah.
Did they steal it?
Sneaky.
They never even used it. It wasn't even a thing. It just
Oh.
somehow, yeah.
Oh, so it was like a
a
meme that
Mandela
just
effect
like,
thing.
oh,
It's a
weird.
pre-meme
Yeah.
meme.
But
That's
anyway, oneshipress.com. If you want to shoot me a message with like, you know, links, you know, if you have a link tree or something like that, obviously we'll put oneshipress.com.
Well, we have
in the
links
description
for
below
all
and
of
all
our
that stuff.
projects. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Sorry about that.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we'll throw, you know, if you send me those links, I'll throw it in the descriptions of the YouTube and of the actual podcast that will go up on Spotify and yeah, all the other places, Apple, and you know, places where people can find the description. You'll be able to either copy and paste a link or click on a hyperlink, things like that. For me, guys, we are still running the Osrin West #1 fantasy western anthology on Kickstarter, kickstarter.com/project/Folsham art/Osrin West. Description will be in the description below, along with my link tree where you can find me all across the internet. And if you would like to support this podcast and all the other things that I do, patreon.com/Folsham_art. Yet another episode where I'm not going to be throwing in mid-roll ads. So those are the ads for you faithful listeners that made it to the end of this podcast. Oneshi Press, Lynsey, Jayel, thank you so much for being on the show. I had a wonderful time. And you're always welcome back in the future to talk about things that maybe aren't specifically podcasts. We can really get into the juicy details of gangbangs in our next conversation.
I'll put it on my calendar.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great being here. We really enjoyed it. Anytime you want to talk to us about anything, just let us know. We're
Awesome.
down. We're into it.
And everyone listening, have a great week. We'll see you next time on Thought Balloons.